Hello, everybody. It is Dr. Weber. Welcome back. We are on to individualized education planning in general PE and adaptive PE. If you are a general PE teacher, most likely you will also be an adaptive physical educator. You will have individuals with disabilities that will be in your class. Remember that students with disabilities are to be taught in the least restrictive environment, which includes to be with peers without disabilities. Or that is the goal, right? So if you have a mild intellectual disability and you have no physical limitations or social limitations that prohibit you from playing games, maybe you're a couple grade levels behind in skipping, but you are able to run and you're able to swing a bat and you're in a baseball game, they'll be included in that general PE curriculum. And so you might have to give them a handout, or you might have them get with a co-leader, maybe a partner or a group of individuals. So you'll be overwatching that individual try to attain their goals that are on their individualized education plan. In adapted PE or adaptive physical educator, you will be going to different schools, working with different individuals, whether it's consulting with a PE teacher, working alongside the PE teacher, or whether it's separating a small class of individuals and working independently with each one. Okay, so for the table of contents, we are at lecture number 4. Lecture number 5, individual education plan, objectives and goal setting. Next lecture will be on assessments, so we'll talk about assessments today. So if you're unfamiliar with them, we will get into them in the next lecture. So you'll be able to discuss curriculum planning and assessment decision and the decision-making process involved in creating IEPs. You'll be able to differentiate between the tiers available to integrate individuals with disabilities in PE and adapted PE. You'll be able to discuss the IEP process, and the stakeholders involved. You'll be able to discuss who must be present during IEP meetings. We'll talk about how to develop IEPs. We'll talk about the physical educator's role in developing an IEP. And we'll describe a checklist of tasks to perform to enhance success in adaptive physical education, which is by law. We'll talk about the criteria for creating the IEP, and then we'll understand how to create an individualized education plan. So, who qualifies for adaptive physical education services? First, the individual with the disability. If they receive special education, they'll also receive adaptive physical education upon assessment. So they'll first get a needs assessment, whether it's by the physical educator or adaptive physical educator, and this is going to provide a present level of performance, or PLP or PLOP. We'll compare and interpret the needs analysis. We'll make a decision based on this information. So we'll compare and interpret the needs analysis results relative to general physical education curriculum and district eligibility criteria for adaptive physical education. So each district may be different. If you're 1 grade level behind, you may be included in general PE. If you're 2 grade levels behind, maybe you need a separate class, or you need a certain tier, maybe tier 3, or working alongside an adaptive physical educator in the general PE setting, or having a paraeducator or some type of visual. So we'll make these decisions based on the needs analysis. You'll get with an IEP group, which will include the special educator, perhaps the parent, any other administrators involved. So question number 2, what functional physical education goals does a student need to achieve to live an active and healthy life? So we want to use a kind of environmental approach, so whatever suits their needs, and then evaluate the needs analysis data and then input from the multiple sources to determine fitness and lifetime physical activity goals for the student. So we want to have an ecological approach and evaluate that needs assessment data in order to determine what physical fitness and goals they're going to have. So we'll create an achievement base. So the decisions we can make are, we can create an achievement-based adaptive physical education curriculum for the student. The scope and sequence of this curriculum will indicate what content will be taught, when it is targeted to be mastered, and what goals will be achieved by the end of high school. So that is kind of the decisions we'll make after that. The next question we'll talk about are what physical education content should be included on the student's IEP. So we want to identify the objectives targeted to be achieved this year in the ABC APE curriculum. So we want to state in the IEP the goals and objectives from the achievement-based adaptive physical education curriculum to be achieved, who should teach them, how they should be taught, and how they will be evaluated, and how much time will be devoted to physical education. What is the least restrictive physical education setting for the student? Compare students' present level performance and achievement-based adaptive physical education-based goals and objectives for the year with the general PE teachers, curriculum, and the continuum of placement options available. So, do they belong in the general PE setting, or do they belong in the general PE setting with a paraeducator, or do they need visuals? Do they need to be in certain groups? Do you need to have an adaptive PE teacher there with you? Do you need to separate them? So we need to determine this next. And then, to the maximum extent possible, we want to place the student in the least restrictive environment where he or she can achieve the achievement-based adaptive PE curriculum goals for the year along the curriculum from adaptive physical education to general PE. Students can have different placements throughout the year based on their learning needs and general PE curriculum content. So, how is daily physical education instruction planned and implemented? We review the assessments, data, and objectives targeted for instruction and identify the next focal points to be mastered. So we're always kind of assessing, evaluating, reassessing, evaluating, and then we're kind of changing the goals based on whether they are mastering them or not mastering them. We want to determine what the student must learn on each skill focal point and then determine how to teach this content given the student's learning attributes. So how is student IEP and achievement-based adaptive PE curriculum progress evaluated? So we want to collect continuous assessment data on the objectives in the achievement-based adaptive PE curriculum. We want to review the evaluation data annually to evaluate and revise the IEP every 3 years. And we want to review the evaluation data to confirm eligibility to make any needed revisions to the achievement-based adapted PE curriculum, which we will go over in a couple slides. So these are the tiers I was talking about. So tier 1, all students in each physical education class will receive quality instruction, and all students are informally screened in basic motor skills such as throwing, catching, running, jumping. And then general movement concepts such as being able to change speeds and directions and space awareness, i.e. moving around in the gym, space safely, are also included in the screening, because we want to make sure that they have spatial awareness, so they're not running into other people and people aren't running into them. This initial observation screen can be quite easily conducted. Physical educator can have students play a game in which they are constrained to perform locomotor patterns and demonstrate basic patterns, movement, concepts, and space awareness. The PE teacher can observe students during the first few weeks of school and identify any needs in students who seem to be struggling with basic movements, so they can kind of pick out students that might be struggling with these movements. And so similarly, the first few weeks of school could include stations where students demonstrate object control skills such as overhand throwing, kicking and catching, striking, and then we can move on to each station, and that would be kind of tier 1. So they're in the general PE class, but we might be going over with those individuals specifically during the class. Tier 2, so students are at risk. Okay, so tier 1 receive supplemental instruction, small groups in areas where they demonstrate motor impairments. For example, several first and second graders are identified as stepping with the same sided foot when throwing rather than their opposite. As part of a tier 2 procedure, these students are given extra instruction and practice opportunities in performing the overhand throw. When setting up skill stations, students who are demonstrating the most skillful throwing patterns are grouped together, and the physical educator makes it a point to go to that station and provide extra instruction and feedback to the student. So, tier 3, students who are not making adequate progress in general PE in tier 2 are provided with more intensive and targeted instruction matched to their motor impairments and rates of progress. Again, interventions are provided by the physical educator in small group settings. Support to the physical educator on how to intervene could be provided by the school district, adaptive physical educator specialists when available. Special education teacher who knows the student well can also give you ideas for motivating them, such as picture schedules or other visual supports, especially students with autism. Or in some cases, by an occupational or physical therapist who can provide some insight on why a student might be struggling with demonstrating skill and how to help the student practice and master the skill. In addition, the general PE teacher could search online through books, and then look at how to help students who are struggling to develop motor skills. So PE Central is a good resource for this that has a lot of good information. Tier 4, students receive individualized intensive interventions that target the student's motor and related skill impairments that are preventing skill performance. Either the general education or adaptive physical education specialist provides intervention. As noted earlier, many school districts do not employ adaptive physical education specialists, so this intervention may be provided by the general PE teacher with support of special education teachers, therapists, and the student's teacher assistant. So, for example, a student with autism who is not making adequate progress will receive one-on-one instruction. The general PE teacher uses the same visual supports noted in Tier 3. However, with one-on-one instruction and support from the teacher assistant, the student is able to stay on task longer and get more practice trials with specific feedback. So if the student begins to make progress of this level with one-on-one support after 6 weeks or so of intense instruction, then continued one-on-one instruction with the general PE teacher along with gradual integration in a small group is warranted. However, if the student still doesn't make adequate progress toward target goals, even with this intense instruction, then the student is referred for a comprehensive evaluation and considered eligible for adaptive physical education under IDEA. So, what is an individualized education plan? That's what we're going to get to next. And so, basically, we can tier up students with disabilities. So, if some individuals may need some just extra attention, some may need some extra supports and intensive instruction, some may need further intensive instruction as well as maybe visuals and aids and maybe paraeducator support. And then some individuals who are not having progress may need one-on-one intervention. And if they're not getting any better after 6 weeks from this, then they might be eligible for adaptive physical education. So this is how we may serve people with disabilities and people we might not expect to have disabilities or who have motor impairments. Okay, so they may be qualified to get this instruction. So what are the skills that we teach? Well, we teach body awareness, locomotor skills, object control skills, fitness, social cognitive skills, and advanced skills. Okay. We teach these at different age levels. So looking at body awareness and understanding where the body parts is, they should have mastered this by the time they're in kindergarten. And this is going to be a scope and sequence of what we call BEST adaptive physical education curriculum. So by kindergarten, they should be able to understand body parts. Okay, we're going to review this in first grade. We're going to maintain this in first grade, and then we're also going to review this again, just kind of throughout their grade level. So we'll talk about body actions. So being able to perform body actions, they should be able to perform that by first grade. We're going to review that in second grade. When it comes to general space, they should be able to master that by first grade. When it comes to personal space, they should be able to master that by kindergarten and repeat that in first grade. When it comes to running forward, they should be able to master that by first grade. When it comes to running backward, they should be able to master that by second grade. When it comes to introducing running backward, we're going to do that in first grade. And when it comes to introducing running, we're going to do that in kindergarten. But they should be able to master that in first grade. Running backward, they should be able to master that by second grade. If they're not able to do that by second grade, they may qualify for adaptive PE, depending on your district's qualifications. When it comes to lateral movement, so moving side to side, they should be able to master that by 3rd grade, but you should introduce that in 1st and 2nd grade. So don't expect them to master that by 1st grade or kindergarten, being able to move laterally, like sliding. When it comes to changing direction, catching the ball, that is going to be mastered by 2nd grade, but we're going to introduce it in kindergarten, 1st grade. So introducing throwing things like yarn balls, scarves, very soft balls to start, maybe beach ball, that type of thing, a bean bag, that type of thing. So they should be able to catch by 2nd grade. They should be able to underhand toss by kindergarten. So they should be able to underhand toss when they're a kindergartner. We'll repeat those skills and maintain those throughout their grade level. When it comes to underhand striking an object, so underhand strike would be something like a pickleball. They should be able to do that by 2nd grade. You may introduce that to them in kindergarten or 1st grade. When it comes to overhand throwing, that's actually going to be mastered in 3rd grade. Okay, so if they're not mastering that by 3rd grade, they may need adaptive PE if they are a couple grade levels behind. Forehand striking, so forehand strike, when you are forehand striking like a badminton or a tennis racket, that will be done more so in 4th grade. When it comes to backhanding, that's going to be done by 5th grade. Overhand striking, that's a little bit more complex. That's going to be 6th grade. When it comes to things like aerobic endurance, that's not going to be until 9th grade, because pacing yourself will take a long time. So just understand that we don't want to force things and go through grade levels unless it's appropriate. So this is about free and appropriate physical education for people with disabilities and making sure you're not going overboard. When it comes to their leg strength, that should be mastered by 7th grade. When it comes to leg and trunk flexibility, we want that by 3rd grade. We want them to be pretty flexible. Rules of tennis, something like tennis strategy or rules of tennis, that's not going to be mastered until 6th grade, so that's more cognitive. When it comes to the rules of volleyball, that's not going to be mastered until 5th grade, but it's going to be repeated. When it comes to volleyball strategy or volleyball etiquette, something like that wouldn't be mastered until 8th grade. When it comes to advanced skills, so something like volleyball bump, that's going to be mastered by 4th grade. Volleyball set, would be 4th grade, and volleyball bump would be 5th grade. So don't expect those things to be done until those grades. Sometimes people try to teach volleyball bumping in kindergartners and it just doesn't work. And you're like, well, how come it doesn't work? Well, it's because it's not appropriate. So understand that things like forehand strike with a racket and backhand strike with a racket aren't going to be mastered until 8th or 9th grade. So those racket skills are going to be pretty tough. But something like pickleball, they can do an underhand strike, right? But underhand strike might be just with a bat, right? Or it might just be with a pickleball and they're just taking a ball and they're underhand striking it. Now, something like that is generally pretty easy. But when it comes to like forehand and backhand, that's going to be a little bit harder. So these would be this would be the curriculum that you look for K through 9, and you try to follow it through this adapted physical education curriculum. So when it comes to IEPs and what IEPs are, this right here is a IEP from a student that had created one, create a brochure for us. So basically, what are the basic requirements of an IEP? Basically, they're going to have the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. So you're going to list their strengths. You're going to talk about, a background about the individual, about their academic performance, about their functional performance, about their physical performance. Talk about stating measurable and annual goals, and if appropriate, short-term objectives or benchmarks. So what you'll want to do is create short and long-term or annual goals. You'll have benchmarks to complete to get to each short or long-term goal, and then you will state when you will plan those goals. And then you'll also talk about the specialized or individualized instruction that you'll be performing to help this individual achieve those goals, because most of the time they're going to have some type of specialized or individualized instruction, whether that's motivational, behavioral, visual, auditorial, or tactile. It's going to be set up differently, because otherwise they would be in general PE with other individuals. So there's got to be a reason why it needs to be adapted. And whether that's social, cognitive, or physical, you have to think of a means. And you'll have known this because you'll have gone through the assessment measures, okay? Statements of special education related services and supplementary aids and services will be typically on an IEP. Statement of participation in general education settings and activities. So you have to show evidence that you're trying to get them integrated into general PE, at least some way, somehow, or eventually, and how your plan for them and curriculum is going to help get them into that atmosphere, because we don't want them to be separated from their general PE students their whole entire academic career. So your goal is to get them in general PE. Schedule of services and modifications, transitional services, transfer of rights and age of majority. Under IDEA, all students with disabilities must have an individualized education plan that outlines the child's special education and related services. Physical education is only one part of the comprehensive IEP document. Okay, who's on this IEP team? The student, parents, student if applicable, school district representative, an individual who can evaluate the results, general education teachers, special ed teachers, additional advocates, could be occupational therapists, physical therapists, transition services agency representatives, and general and adaptive PE teachers should be at this meeting. When it comes to writing an IEP, and you'll have IEP annual goals like we talked about, and then we'll have what is expected from the student specifically, and then we'll talk about those required benchmarks. Okay, these are going to be those SMART goals. So by when, who will do what, under what conditions, at what level of proficiency, as measured by whom or what. So specific, are they measurable, right? Are they attainable? Are you able to actually attain this goal? Because a lot of times you set a goal that's a little bit too high or a little bit too low, so just kind of make it perfect for the individual if possible. When it comes to IEPs in physical education, physical educators should be involved in writing IEP goals and objectives related to physical education activities. However, PE teachers are typically not involved in this process or the IEP team unless the student is eligible for adaptive physical activity or education. So PE teachers, just know the students with disabilities that are in your class, know the students that are not in your class that are getting adaptive PE, and if I were you, I would try to go to those IEP meetings, because it's going to give you some insight on how to teach individuals with disabilities who will eventually be in your class. So this is going to be good for you. It may even give you an opportunity to meet the student or the parent or the teachers involved and get to know the strategies on the other side of things beside PE, how this individual learns, which will give you better insight on how to teach this individual. Okay, who must be present at the IEP meeting? Student if appropriate, one of the student's parents, at least one or more general education teacher, one special ed teacher, a school district representative like we talked about, and the regular physical educator. It's not required to, but I would highly recommend it. And what assessments are used? There's participation assessments, fitness assessments, gross motor skills, motor pattern development. We'll talk about assessments next in the next lecture. When it comes to evaluations, anyone who's knowledgeable background on PE curriculum and or someone who is present in adaptive PE or PE class on a consistent basis can highlight the measurable goals to ensure progress is being made. This is typically going to be done by the PE teacher. There'll be end of year annual meetings. You'll have to bring a copy of the IEP. You have to know the goals determined earlier in the year. You'll have to discuss eligibility services, present level academic achievement, and functional performance and overall progress of those goals that you have been outlining and trying to meet through benchmarks. So, questions that you should be asking: could you tell me about my child's day so I can understand what it looks like? This might be a question from the parent. Another question from the parent: can you explain how what you're seeing for my child is different from other kids in the classroom? Could we walk through the current program and IEP plan piece by piece? How's my child doing in making progress toward IEP goals? Is this a SMART goal? How is this goal measured and my child's progress monitored? So making sure that the parents understand that they can ask questions at the IEP meetings, and they should be aware of all the things that are going on within the IEP. And we want them to be a part of the IEP process, because we know that if we get a parent involvement in the IEP process, there's more likelihood that we'll get adherence to that goal. Okay, so when it comes to the IEP checklist, so when it comes to physical education services, we're going to use this checklist as a tool to make sure the IEP team fully addresses your child's physical education placement and services. So this can be given to a parent of an individual with a disability. It also takes us through the steps of what an IEP is and the services provided. So discuss each of these sections with the IEP team. If you're uncertain, ask questions in the team meeting. Don't check an item until you fully understand or are in agreement. Document any issue that you have. Write your concerns into the parent input portion of the IEP. Complete a prior written notice form, and visit rightslaw.com for more information. So this is all information for the parent. Okay. So before the meeting, an IEP team member offered you a copy of the parental procedure rights for due process. They should have done that, yes or no. Okay. You have requested in writing, verbally, and additional testing with regard to physical education you believe your child may need, yes or no. Okay. You know the physical education placement and services the school is delivering to your child, yes or no. This applies to a child with physical education goals and objectives already agreed upon, and progress reports should happen in concurrence with report cards for every student at your child's school. So know this before the meeting. Okay. During the meeting, eligibility for services. Use this section only when the student is either being evaluated to receive adaptive PE services or when adaptive PE services may be discontinued. So if someone is discontinuing services or they need services during the meeting, professional in education with knowledge of motor development and physical education has evaluated your child's skills, abilities with regard to their physical education curriculum, yes or no. Have they done that? Has someone with professional knowledge in PE or adaptive PE assessed them, evaluated their skills and abilities, and has actually gone through maybe 6 weeks with them? The physical education evaluation team, the adaptive PE teacher, physical therapist assess your child with regard to their physical skills and any other areas of concern, cognitive and social abilities. So not just psychomotor, but also cognitive assessments and affective assessments. The evaluation included an appropriate testing instrument, so like the TGMD3 or the C-tape, with multi-confirming data, interviews, authentic testing, and rubrics. So we'll talk more about the assessments, criterion, and norm reference based assessments in the next lecture. If your child is eligible for adaptive PE services, the IEP indicates the service provider for your adaptive PE on the IEP, and the provider must attend the meeting. If the provider is not in attendance, he has contacted you with information regarding all the sections and below, and you gave written consent for this absence. So making sure that the right individuals are at the meeting. When it comes to present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, the IEP team adequately discuss your child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, including progress towards physical education curriculum level benchmark. So we want them to make sure that they are testing them based on grade level benchmarks so that they can eventually achieve their grade level or enhance their current grade level, and then eventually get into general physical education with their peers. So we want to see that there's progress toward these grade level benchmarks that they're currently going through in their IEPs. My most recent physical education evaluations and evaluation results, you have those, make sure that they're there. Abilities, needs, and any other attributes that relate to your child's performance in physical education. So we want to make sure that they identify those. We want to make sure that social engagement and relationships with peers with regard to physical education is included, that there's some type of goals or inclusive strategy for that, social inclusion strategy. Your child's cognitive understanding of physical education curriculum content, that they're understanding more than just locomotor and physical skills, that they're actually learning how to either know the strategies or rules to game, or create their own programs, that type of thing. Goals and objectives. If a child receives adapted PE services, he or she should also have goals and objectives to measure his mastery of the curriculum. The goals related to the identified area of difficulty indicated in the PLAAFP. So I'm not sure what that specifically is, but might have to go to rightslaw.com to figure out what that is. The goals, objectives align to your child's grade level physical education curriculum standards. So the goals, objectives are specific to your child's abilities and interests and clearly written. Okay, so making sure that they're using SMART goals, making sure that they've created goals and objectives. Okay, the goals, objectives are meaningful, measurable, observable, and realistic for your child. So they're not creating goals like that aren't really going to functionally help them. So let's just say that your son or daughter needs to lose weight, or they need to be able to burn fat efficiently. So maybe they need to walk more, and the PE teacher set a goal for flexibility. Okay, and so maybe you're trying to get them to move more, but the PE teacher is looking at flexibility as a goal. So maybe they're not, really appropriate or meaningful. So sometimes you might want to change or get those changed. The IEP explains how often physical education or adapted PE teacher will communicate with you on child's progress toward the goals and objectives. So make sure that they are going to communicate you on achieving this progress toward the goals. When it comes to services, you are aware of the physical education setting where your child will receive physical education services, whether it's with their non-disabled peers or in a self-contained class. So you should know where the setting is. There shouldn't be a mystery. You're aware that the physical education placement options available in school district are certain that your child is receiving physical education services in the least restrictive environment. So as a parent, it's important to understand what least restrictive environment is, because if you feel that your son or daughter could be in general PE but they're not, or being excluded or isolated, then you need to make sure that you bring this up at the IEP meeting. The IEP documents the frequency, duration of adapted PE services your child will receive, so you want to know how many services they're going to get. A qualified PE teacher or adapted PE teacher will delivering physical education services to your child. Someone that is knowledgeable. You can ask the PE teacher, hey, how much experience do you have teaching adapted PE? Ask them these questions. Supplementary aids. We're not going to go through all these, but supplementary aids, so such as any type of supports like pictures, paraeducators, any modified content, any type of modified grading that you're going to perform, behavior contracts, positive reinforcers, sensory inputs, adaptive equipment. So what type of supplementary aids are they going to be able to provide for you that maybe your individual needs if they have a physical impairment, or utilizes a wheelchair? So you want to make sure that they're giving you supplementary aids to make them to give them the least restrictive environment. Then secondary level transition programming. So this is only required when your child is at the age when he or she is eligible to receive transition services as early as 14 and no later by 16. Okay, discuss how your child will access physical education that could include recreation activities within the community. So we want to know that they have a community outlet, that there's not just a placement in PE or adaptive PE, that they start looking into recreational activities. And this needs to be monitored from in high school. Consider your child's likes and dislikes with regard to PE activities and the community. So you're giving them an option, you're giving them choices on what would be meaningful to them. We want to develop specific and measurable goals based on your child's for your child to successfully access meaningful PE and physical activities in the community. So this is outside of the PE class. So this is what we talk about when we talk about transition programming. Discuss with your child any foreseeable barriers to his preferred physical education, recreational activities, as well as the solutions for overcoming those barriers. Maybe they want to join a gym, but they can't afford it. Maybe they want to go to be on this Special Olympics basketball team, but they're not skilled enough to, so they might have to learn how to play basketball, or they may have to show up to practice and start practicing more and understand that they have to get better. They may not be able to afford transportation, and so we have to talk about there's a solutions for overcoming these barriers that they're going to have. Any additional questions to consider at the end of the meeting? So the general and adaptive PE teacher has a copy of your child's IEP. You want them to have that. That's not just something that's just floating around. The IEP team adequately discuss whether your child needs extended school year and adaptive physical education services to make sure that your child does not lose knowledge or skills already learned throughout the school year. So you may need extended school year and adaptive PE services to make sure that they don't fall behind, because we know that during the summer people can fall behind. The IEP team adequately discuss whether your child needs a functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plan and physical education to make meaningful progress towards attaining the physical education curriculum standards. So any behavioral modifications and intervention plan needs to be discussed. We'll talk more about behavior and interventions when it comes to behavior in our last lecture. Then the IEP team adequately discuss how your child will access extracurricular physical activities, e.g. basketball team, swimming team, and that this is discussed at the end of the year meeting, because the goal is to get them in lifetime fitness and sport activities. So whether that's Special Olympics, in my opinion, would probably be the best thing. We want them to do that because we know that they're going to be more lifelong learners. Okay. All right. So we appreciate that, Scott, Lauren, Brad, and Garth, for parents everywhere, and for educators to understand that we can empower our parents through a checklist that y'all have created for adaptive physical educators and PE teachers and parents of people with disabilities. This is another roadmap that's included in the PowerPoint that talks about an IEP and the roadmap for physical education. It goes through the special education laws and rights. It determines eligibility, talks about how to determine for eligibility. So basically, the referral process usually starts when a teacher, parent, or doctor notices that a student is not performing a set standards in the classroom. The concern is then brought to the attention of notified to the school counselor or psychologist. The next step involves gathering data regarding the student's academic progress through a meeting with the parents, a meeting with the student observations, and analysis of student's performance. The student's performance analysis involves areas such as attention, behavior, work completion, tests, classwork, and homework. Okay. This goes on and discusses further an eligibility requirements, what's in an IEP. Basically, there's two purposes: to set reasonable learning goals for a student and to state the services that the school district will provide for the student. So we want that to be, this is going to be signed and dated, and this is going to be monitored and evaluated. So make sure if you're on the IEP team, you understand all this. We talked about who's in the IEP team. Could be lots of different people involved: parents, student with disabilities, school system representative, school general ed PE teacher, adaptive PE teacher, transitional service individual. So many people on the team that are going to be in there. You have pre-meeting plans, during the IEP meeting plans, and then different related services So a student may require any of the following related services in order to benefit from special education. Related services as listed under IDEA include but are not limited to auditory services, counseling, medical services, occupational services, mobility services, physical therapy, psychological, recreational, nurse, rehabilitational, social work, speech, language, and transportation. So another good guide, and then it talks about writing the IEP and what that is about. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But this is another resource in our PowerPoint. Now we're going to go through an IEP example. So this is from Long Beach Adaptive PE, which is the leader, in my opinion, in teaching adaptive PE. And they use a rubric here that shows what the student or what the teacher has to perform or determine based on the present level of performance, annual goals, benchmarks, and dates and materials and methods used to attain those goals. So I'll just kind of go over what this means. So basically, individualized education plans, what we do is we map out a background of the individual based on the present level performance statement. So we're going to clearly, briefly write a paragraph statement of the student's strengths, needs, and general statements of the present level performance goals only. Then we're going to have measurable terms that positively reflect what the individual can accomplish. We're going to have a present level performance for all three goals. And then we're going to write out the annual goals. So we're going to make sure that all annual goals are directly linked to present level performance. We're going to make sure that the annual goals are measurable, including audience, behavior, condition, and degree, includes prompts. Example, verbal, visual, hand-over-hand assistance, goal of 70%. All goals are realistic, functional age appropriate to individual, moving toward a level of independence with some process-oriented goals. 1 sentence only, 2 motor goals, 1 cognitive, or 1 social goal, a total of 3 annual goals. Then you will have benchmarks to meet these goals, which will include appropriate selection of 3 benchmarks based on the annual goal. Measurable include audience, behavior, condition, and degree, includes prompts, verbal, visual, hand-over-hand assistance. Examples indicate trail numbers, not percentage. Sequential process-oriented benchmarks to meet the goals. Then you'll also have the dates and materials and methods to reach the benchmarks, which should be the modified and individualized instruction that you will perform for the individual, as well as the dates. They should be realistic. Any materials that you use are listed, equipment, polyspots are described, and this should all have appropriate grammar. So let's give you an example. So, student Jade Lopez, age 8, height 4'9", weight 95 pounds, educational placement, special day class, disability, intellectual disability. So we have an 8-year-old named Jade with an intellectual disability. So we're going to write out the present level academic achievement and functional performance statements in physical education. Here we go. So this is the present level performance statement. Jade is a 9-year-old female student who's in 3rd grade at Robe Elementary School. In February of this year, she was moved from a general third grade class to special day class. So Jade shows interest in most physical activities and has played on softball team for the past 2 years and really enjoys it. According to her parents, it is often hard to motivate Jade in her general PE class when she is faced with challenging activities. She scored below average on the test of gross motor development, or the TGM-3. For the locomotor section, her scaled score was a 6, below average, and for the ball skills, her scale score was an 8, average. The CARE R2 assessment was also used to observe her dribbling with feet and kicking skills, as well as some locomotor skills. She scored emerging in the ball skills of dribbling and kicking a ball, and rudimentary on jumping a self-turned rope. She is easily frustrated when working on these skills in general education, physical education class. So when it comes to things like rudimentary and emerging, where does this fall in the line of levels? Well, we'll talk about the levels in these assessments in the following lecture. But for now, basically you're writing out their present level performance based on assessment. So you're talking about a little background of the individual, and then you're going through the assessments that are basically the rationale why they're going into a special class. And so this special day class is an isolated small class for individuals specifically with disabilities, where they can get more individual attention because they may fall behind from their peers. And this individual has an intellectual disability, which kind of increases the likelihood that they'll get adaptive PE, but not totally. But since they want to play baseball or on the softball team, they really enjoy it. They want to help her hone in on those skills to increase them to get back to grade level. So, annual goals and projected dates. Jade will, with verbal prompts, kick an 8 to 10 inch stationary soccer ball 20 feet, placing her non-kicking foot close to the ball and kicking with her instep or inside of the preferred foot 4 out of 5 times by March 20th of 2024. So based on that CARE 2R2 assessment, when it comes to dribbling and kicking skills, we determined that this would be a good goal when it comes to that specific assessment. So benchmarks and projected dates for this specific goal. Jade with verbal and visual prompts will kick an 8 to 10 inch stationary ball 10 feet, placing her non-kicking foot close to the ball and kicking with an instep or inside of preferred foot 2 out of 5 times by September 20th, 2023. The next benchmark would be by December 20th to do this 15 feet and then 20 feet in February. So getting that goal by March, kick that 20 feet, but slowly the benchmarks, as you can see in each of the projected dates, slowly increases. What are the materials and methods used? You have an 8 to 10 inch soccer ball, so you need to be specific. It's 8 to 10 inch soccer ball. It's not just a ball. Poly spots for ball placement and visual prompts. Okay, so they put the ball on top of a poly spot and they use visual prompts. So they probably had a picture of the ball being kicked by the foot. Foot shaped spots for non-cooking placement, so the individual knew where to put the foot next to the ball, so they knew where the non-kicking foot went. And then verbal cues: plant your non-kicking foot next to the ball. Use the inside of your foot to kick it. So those would be the materials and methods used. That would be the individualized instruction, especially specialized instruction specific to this annual goal and the benchmarks to attain it. The second annual goal: Jade will, with verbal and visual prompting, perform a 2-foot jump while self-turning a rope in forward direction 2 times consecutively in 4 out of 5 attempts by March 20th, 24th. So the first 2-foot turning self, 1 out of 5 attempts by September, 3 out of 5 attempts by that should probably be November 20th, and then by December they should have 2 out of 5 attempts consecutively. So going up substantially for a little bit and then going down a little bit. When it comes to their affective goals, we have Jaden with verbal prompting use teachers' effort posters, identify her effort using 2 examples after 2 consecutive lessons by March 20th. So the benchmark and projected dates, the short-term behavioral objectives that measure progress towards annual goal. So Jade will, with verbal prompting and using the teacher's effort posters, identify her effort at 3 consecutive lessons. So maybe she's not good at describing her effort, so she's using a poster that identifies effort, and she's pointing to the effort that she is performing at to help with motivation. Jade will, with verbal prompting and using a teacher's effort posters, identify her effort at least 1 example, 2 consecutive lessons, and then I think it goes up to another 2 consecutive lessons. So that's I was looking at going back at this one. I'm going to go back to the second annual goal because a little confused by that one. So Jade will, with verbal and visual prompting, perform a 2-foot jump while self-turning a rope, forward direction 2 times consecutive, 4 out of 5 times. Benchmark 1, with verbal and visual prompting, perform a single 2-foot jump. Okay. And then it goes single 2-foot jump while self-turning a rope in the forward direction 1 out of 5 attempts by September 20th. And then Jade will, with verbal and visual prompting, perform a single 2-foot jump while self-turning a rope in the forward direction 3 to 5 attempts. That should probably be October, not September. And then Jade will, with verbal and visual prompting, perform a 2-foot jump while self-turning a rope in the forward direction 2 times consecutively, 2 out of 5 attempts. Okay. So this would be an example of an IEP from a student with a disability. And then I think I have one more example. And we'll see what we have for some annual goals. First annual goal, Kevin will be able to strike a self-bounce ball with a paddle. Child takes backstring when ball bounced, steps with non-preferred foot, paddle follows through at least 8 out of 10 times. Okay, a couple benchmarks. Notice that the amount of times goes up for each benchmark, so the goals slowly progress to get to the main benchmark. What I think I was looking at the last goal is that when we looked at the background and we saw that the individual really liked softball, I wondered how come there wasn't any softball annual goals. Okay, and so maybe the reason why is because they enjoy it and they do good at it, and so maybe they were just trying to scale her higher for the other skills that may be more challenging. So when she's faced with more challenging activities, she did a little bit. She didn't do as well as her peers. So maybe they use the goals based on what she needs the most instead of what she's good at. So I like how they did that. Here's another example. If you want to run through it, it'll be on the PowerPoint. What is next? We'll talk about assessments. So now we're going to talk about what assessments you will utilize for specific disabilities, and then we'll talk about how we can use those assessments to guide our individual education planning goals and objectives. I appreciate everyone. Thank you for hopping on here. I look forward to teaching you about assessments in adaptive PE. Have a good one.